The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101. We're so happy you joined us this week. Over the next hour, you'll learn the tips, tricks, and vital information that will help you keep yourself confident and safe. Now, here's your host, Susan Bartlestone.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101, the personal safety radio show with an optimistic perspective on a sober subject. I'm your host, Susan Bartlestone. And I'm so glad that you've joined me today, decided to hang out with me for a little while. You know, it's always my great privilege to spend time with you, helping you keep yourself safe. January, in case you forgot, is National Personal Self-Defense Awareness Month. And I did a wonderful show on self-defense at the beginning of the month, January 7th. So if you missed that show, you can still hear the podcast right from my host page on voiceamerica.com website. And January is also National Stalking Awareness Month. And because this topic has so many different facets, I'm going to be doing programs on it for this week and next week. In my first segment, I'm going to be talking about a type of stalking called cyberstalking. And cyberstalking is defined as a crime in which the attacker harasses a victim with threatening messages using electronic communication, such as email or instant messaging, messages posted on a website or a discussion group, and in my guest case today, also via telephone. And a cyberstalker usually relies on anonymity, which they get over the Internet, which allows them, they think, to stalk their victim without being detected. My case today is a little different in that my guest, Amy Adelstein, actually is both a stalking and a cyberstalking victim, and there are some very unusual wrinkles to her story. Then I'm going to be talking about cyberstalking and social media, how it works and what you can do to protect yourself. And I've got some tips and resources for you, and I think you'll agree that I've got a really informative show for you today. So if you know someone who should be listening, who might not be, hey, you know what? Send out a text message about us, send an IM, start tweeting if you're on Twitter, anything so that they can join us too. Now, first of all, I want to introduce you to my first guest, Amy Adelstein. Amy is a social worker and a rape crisis coordinator at the Safe Horizon facility in Staten Island, New York, which is the nation's largest victim services agency, and they have more than 80 programs for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and just so many more areas that they cover. She speaks all over New York City at events dedicated to promoting awareness and prevention around sexual violence. And she's also the director of the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault Improvisational Training Troupe. And this is for their sexual assault forensic examiner preceptorship training program. And that's a long name. And I happen to be one of the actors in the troupe, and that's where I met Amy. Now, for the past few years, Amy has been cyberstalked by her brother, who is mentally ill and a substance abuser. It's quite a story. But it looks like the case is finally going to be resolved. Amy, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Hi, Susan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, Amy, this is really an unusual story. And let's start at the beginning. talk a little bit about what happened, when the stalking started, and why.
Sure. So back in January of 2008, my brother, who's my half-brother, we have the same mother, he, like you said, he is mentally ill. He's diagnosed with bipolar disorder as well as borderline personality disorder. He's also, been using substances on and off for a lot of his life. He's 35 years old. My mother has been financially supporting him, and in the beginning of January 2008, she decided to stop financially supporting him, and he decided to take his anger out on me. So during that time, started on January 27th, he called me over and over, 100, 200 calls a night. The first cycle of that stalking lasted approximately 3 or 4 days, where he called me about 500 or 600 times. He left me over 20 or 30 messages saying he was going to come up and kill me. My brother lives in Florida, but because he's so unstable and because I never know what he's really going to do, and he has been violent in the past to other people, not towards me, I was really fearful for my life and my safety.
Yeah, this story has the unusual wrinkle of actually knowing who the stalker is and having. I mean, many times there are a more traditional stalking. It's an ex-husband or a boyfriend, and this has the additional emotional wrench of it being a family member, a brother, and so forth. And now talk about how you first sought help for this and the quagmire that this kind of falls into.
Well, at first when this started, I kept thinking that eventually it was going to stop. For my own protection, I finally decided to go to the police and make a police report. When I did do that, they did take a report for harassment, but there was really nothing they were going to do because I'm in New York City and he's in Florida, and this isn't a serious enough offense that they would go bring him back up here. And that seemed to be a continuing theme throughout this whole incident, is that New York, although the crimes were occurring here because I was on the other end of the phone or the computer, New York City, New York State, and Florida kept arguing over whose jurisdiction was this appropriate to have, to handle. And although there was, over 8 or 9 police reports by the end of this, I also had an order of protection in family court. My brother was continuing to threaten me and call me at work and at home. He did know where I worked. He did know where I lived. Sometimes when it got worse and I thought he was really coming up, I had to, stay with friends or move around a little bit. I was also asked, for my own safety and for the safety of my coworkers, to not come back to work for a few days when it was also at its peak. It was really me trying to rearrange my life and also being terrified, doing so.
And this is actually a very typical kind of stalking scenario, because workplace becomes involved in it, and the safety of the workplace, and employers can handle it very differently sometimes. And I don't know if I don't know what to say about what your employer did. I mean, hopefully that was the right decision, but
right.
It's difficult.
No, and it was, and actually, fortunately, I do happen to work for a victim assistance agency, and so we do have an anti-stalking program as well. So, for my benefit, I happen to have an incredible support system at work, from my supervisors, from my agency. But unfortunately, that's certainly not the case in most scenarios. For most workplaces, would probably be unfamiliar and not really know how or what the best thing to do in this situation would be, and how to keep their the victim safe, their employee safe.
And this is another reason why it's really important to seek help from an agency that is experienced with it, because I think that they can offer some help to the workplace also, and other people that might be involved. Because if you're being stalked and you're trying to seek help from a family member and they're unprepared, there's got to be some place that you can go to. We'll talk about that, how to get some help and whatnot. But this is definitely a difficult problem because nobody was stepping up to the plate in terms of the court and whose jurisdiction it was. Take it up from there. What happened at this point?
Sure. This continued January, February, March, April. By April, I had a final order of protection from family court in Staten Island, which my brother continued to violate every time he calls and threatened me. Some detectives from Manhattan and Staten Island were speaking with detectives down in Florida as well. And again, they kept kind of going back and forth. Well, whose jurisdiction really is this, and how do we stop this? And there's only so much they can do. And we're talking probably, almost over 1,000 calls. Some of the things that I was doing to protect myself and to kind of build my case, which, fortunately I do know from doing this kind of work and from helping other victims in this situation, is that I was keeping really detailed logs of all the times he called me. I was getting my phone records so that I could have proof to go and take to the police with me, because they really need to see this when they have phone records to actually look at how many times they're calling, and when they saw 60, 70, 80 times in a 2-3 hour period, it became kind of more visible for them.
And that's an incredibly important point too. And one of the first things that a counselor will tell you, you've got to keep immaculate records of every contact, whether it's physical stalking or cyber stalking or whatever. And sometimes it's easier with the phone. I remember you telling me that your phone would actually record. It would record the number of times that he called.
Right.
And so you want to have that record. We used to say keep a journal. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you did that, but
I definitely did. I kept a journal, and those things are valid. Even if you write it down on a piece of paper, I saw him at this time in this place, or he called me and said this. I mean, those things, although they may seem kind of informal, those are the things that the police are really looking for, and the court really needs to be able to prove a case like this.
Yes, exactly. In order to bring it to court, you've got to have, a nice, really something that they can say, oh yes, this occurred. So that was the first thing that you did. What else did you do that was helpful in terms of dealing with the phone calls, constant phone calls?
Well, because of my job, because part of my job is to be on call and have my cell phone on at all times, that was one of the reasons, people would always ask me, well, why don't you just change your phone number? The police would say, just change your phone number. And one of the reasons that I just refused to do so is, one, I felt like, well, I'm the victim. Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to change my number? Why can't he just be, punished for breaking the law? And number two, I really, it had taken me a while to establish my phone number, in terms of my work. And so I really didn't want to go to the trouble of changing that. And I also felt that if I did change the number, then it would make him even more angry, and maybe he would just come up and kill me, or continue to try to find other ways to harass me. So there's a lot of mixed feelings on that.
Yeah, and this is another interesting wrinkle in this case, because of the fact that it was a cell phone. Now, I'll tell you what, Amy, let's take a quick pause here. We're talking about stalking coming up, and I want to talk about some things you can do, some strategies with the telephone. And there is so much show left to tune in for that you've just got to start tweeting about us. We'll be right back.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our All-Star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartlestone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information. Two views.
Different topics.
Questions.
Answers.
News.
And advice.
You'll want to check out Ecoman and the Skeptic live from Philadelphia University.
Every week, join hosts Rob Fleming and Chris Pastor as they tackle a different topic on sustainability.
You'll hear all sides of the issue, supported by guests who provide valuable insights.
Get ready to be engaged, educated, and entertained when you tune into Ecoman and the Skeptic.
Broadcast live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time on the Green Talk Network.
Stop wasting time. Get what you want. Live your dream life. The Dream Big Revolution. Imagine having more freedom, better health, more money, happiness. Could your business be more successful? Unless you're living the life you want, you're wasting precious time. Your life is too valuable to waste. Let Leanne Hilgers help you find health, wealth, and happiness. Listen in and live your dream life. Join the Dream Big Revolution. Tune in every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Seventh Wave Network.
Streaming live. The leader in Internet talk radio. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone.
Hi, Susan Bartlestone here. And if you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Amy Adelstein, and we're talking about stalking and cyberstalking. And I'm going to be posting some information on my blog site, Crime Prevention 101, some of the tips that I talk about on the show today. And from there, you'll be able to share it with people on your Facebook or Twitter page, email it to friends. And hey, you know what? You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook, too. I would love to have you as a friend. Now, right before the break, we were talking about the problem of getting these hundreds of phone calls. Now, if Amy, if you've been using a regular landline, there are more protections available, filtering, blocking, and so forth, by a traditional phone company.
Right.
But a cell phone, and a lot of people are in this boat today that they only have a cell phone. It's economical, and there's many other reasons. And there aren't the same protections available for someone with a cell phone. And one of the things that you and I had talked about before, and this is something that we talk about with the landline as well, in terms of changing the number. Now, you had some valid reasons why you couldn't do that. For other people, that may be a good option. And what we advise, when you leave the number that the stalker is calling on active, and only give that, and only let the stalker have that. I mean, the stalker has that number. Give your new phone number, make it unlisted, with the protections that your phone service provider can give you, and give that number out very guardedly, so that basically the only person calling the other phone will be the stalker within a pretty short period of time. And you can keep that phone turned off, and you can still keep a record of the calls. And that way you're not harassed at all hours of the day and night. Now, the key, though, Amy, is what you said, that you felt, given knowing who your stalker was, that it would make him more violent, and that's why you didn't want to do anything like that. So it's a very good point to keep in mind. You have to know who the person is and what you can do. And also, one other thing, by the way, about that, if the person is at all technologically savvy. This is just buying you a little time until you can put other safeguards in place. It's not hard if you know what you're doing to get phone numbers, even unlisted numbers. I don't know. I guess I don't know if that advice was given to you, but
yeah,
sad but true.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now there's another interesting wrinkle to this case. When you were not getting help from the police department, what did you do then?
Well, after dealing with this for 7 months, with him still calling me and texting me and emailing me and, making several police reports and having the order of protection violated, hundreds of times, someone from my work, from my agency, got me in touch with someone from the FBI. And they thought that it might be a better place for them to get involved because it was interstate. And so in November, the FBI did get involved, and that is really how eventually he was arrested. So he did continue to stalk me. It was under a year. It was from January 27, 2008, and he was arrested on January 16, 2009. And he was arrested by the FBI in Florida, and he was eventually extradited up here to New York City, where the federal case took place.
And what happened? What's going on now?
Well, he was charged with 2 different things. One was interstate stalking, which is, calling and making threats between states continuously and leaving the victim in fear. And the other charge was interstate threats.
And these are all federal offenses.
These are federal crimes, which are, they're pretty serious felonies. And also because because really stalking is such a newly recognized crime, not many people are prosecuting these cases. So I think, because this was going on for almost a year, because fortunately I did know what to do and I did know how to advocate for myself, and I, was working with someone at an agency who helped me, kind of figure out what to do and how to proceed. I think that's really the only reason why this case ended up going anywhere. And I think sadly most of the time, for many, many reasons, nothing ends up happening with these cases in court.
Indeed, and that from my research, I was told that not all states have cyberstalking laws,
mm-hmm.
so there isn't any way to charge people with anything very much, and the penalties, like with stalking, the penalties can seem extremely mild,
right?
Considering someone calling you 500 times in a night. Now, your brother actually did do a little bit of jail time, is that right?
He did. He was actually incarcerated for 6 months from January to July. And at that point, they were trying to still figure out what they were going to do with the case. And they ended up deferring the prosecution, kind of holding off on it, and sending him to a 3-month voluntary MICA program, which is mentally ill, chemically addicted program, so that he could have a chance to see if he could get some help. And then they would come back to the charges. And so he did follow through with that up here in New York. He was there from July and released in October. And then in October, they still hadn't found a charge that they felt was something they could drop the charge down to. They were trying to give him a misdemeanor instead of a felony, and they actually deferred prosecution again and sent him back to Florida, where he's been on house arrest since October. He's still on house arrest in Florida. He's allowed to, look for a job right now and get some mental health and substance abuse help, and then hopefully this case will be shortly resolved. They might transition from federal charges to state charges, so that he could stay in Florida and not be here, where he's more of a risk to me up in New York.
Mm-hmm. So even though this may seem like a mild sentence, or has it resolved some of the the calling and the texting and everything?
Yeah, he has not called me at all or texted me. He has not contacted me in any way since he's been arrested. So, my level of fear has definitely, subsided, knowing that he is still on house arrest. He can't really leave, and now he's not even in New York, which is a good thing. But, there's a lot of other feelings that this case has brought up because it is my brother and because I, never wanted to see him in jail or, this has just been a really, really difficult and terrifying situation for me.
Yeah, there's no way to soft soap it. I mean, it's a horrible situation. Someone love and trust, which is a very typical part of a stalking situation, is threatening to do harm to you and terrorizing you. And I thank you so much for being willing to come forth with it and talk about it. We know that that's helpful. Yeah. I know that you know that. It also helps other people to hear that they're not, if they're going through the same thing. It takes a great deal of courage. And Amy, you said that the best resolution was not jail for him, but to get the lighter sentence. And that's not always everybody's feeling.
Right. And I think if he had been a stranger, this would have been a completely different kind of feeling for me. I mean, that's kind of what makes these situations so difficult for the victim is, whether you have an intimate relationship or they're a family member or someone you care about as opposed to just a stranger.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What do you plan? Do you have a contingency plan? Because that would also be something that we would advise you to do if the stalking and the cyberstalking resumed. Do you have a backup plan? What would you do?
To be honest, I don't have so much of a plan right now. I'm just kind of waiting for the next court date to find out what's going to happen next. But I think ultimately, just making sure that I do try to keep myself safe and always have a cell phone really ready with me in case I do see him or in case something happens and I can call 911. I mean, there's not a whole lot, to be able to keep you safe besides really knowing what you're going to do and trying to, follow through with that.
I want to recommend pepper spray.
That too.
I happen to like pepper spray, although let's note that if someone is on a substance or is mentally ill and in a rage, then it isn't advisable. So let me make that clear, because it doesn't work the way we normally would. But in general, pepper spray is another good protective thing that you can do. And maybe at that point, it appears that I think what we talked about before was that the incarceration did make an impression on him, and
hopefully,
yeah, that's what maybe has stopped this. And the other thing too is that I think that your mother is still helping him out, which is what precipitated this. So
right.
That's an unfortunate thing, but it may be, maybe that's the it's not always the way we would like it, but that's the way we sometimes have to settle what's going on. Certainly this is not a perfect world. Now I want to give safehorizon.org is a great resource website for information about stalking. And is there an email there, Amy, that you can give if people want to talk to you about this?
Sure. My email is Edelstein, AEDELSTEIN @safehorizon.org.
Okay, and that's safehorizon.org. And there's another great website called survivorsinaction.com. And this is a group, and this is something, Amy, you might want to check into, where you get a great deal of support about cyber stalking, It gives you the laws in different states. It gives you resources. And I've actually spoken to Alexis Moore, who runs this. So I would suggest that you take a look at this, survivorsinaction.com.
Great.
And Amy, thank you so very much. I know that you and I will be seeing each other shortly.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. And please do me a favor and let me know what the outcome is. If there's anything else going on, I'd like to, keep in touch with you about this.
I definitely will.
And thanks so much for being with me on Crime Prevention 101.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Now, when we come back, I'm going to be talking with Tim Dimoff, and we're going to be talking about cyber stalking and social media, which is another wrinkle in cyber stalking. So don't go away.
Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787.
That's it.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartlestone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information.
To perform at your maximum potential, you need to have all aspects of your life working properly. On Mind, Brain, and Body, Dr. Michael John Kell will bring you honest, open discussions concerning your physical, mental, and financial health. If you're ready to find purpose and meaning in your life, tune in to Mind, Brain, and Body every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific. Mind, Brain, and Body on Voice America Health and Wellness. Radio dedicated to your health, wealth, wisdom, and purpose.
There are all kinds of questions pertaining to health and wellness. What most people don't realize is that there are a lot of treatments that they can do themselves. Tune in to For Your Health with Dr. Mark Larson to discover these treatments and the answers to many of your questions about health. Topics covered will run the gamut from alternative medicine to the science of modern medicine. So be sure to tune in every week. For Your Health airs live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel.
Stimulating talk.
Gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone.
This is Crime Prevention 101. Thanks so much for tuning in today. And don't forget that I've got a nice blog site for you, crimeprevention101.com, where you can look at what more information about show topics, see pictures of my guests. You can get on my mailing list. You can email me directly for there. So crimeprevention101.com. Don't forget to check me out. All right, I want to introduce my next guest. His name is Timothy Dimoff, and he is the founder of a high-risk security consulting firm called Sachs Consulting, and he spent over 20 years as an award-winning narcotics detective and SWAT team member before he sustained a career-ending injury during a drug raid. And he is now a nationally recognized expert on violent behavior and criminal investigation. And he has provided crime commentary for such networks as MSNBC, CNN, and Court TV. He's an expert on cyber stalking and particularly the relationship between cyberstalking and social media. And that's what we're going to be talking with him about today. He's also written several books, and his most recent one is Life Rage, which it's such an interesting title, so I'm going to ask him a little bit about that, too. So anyway, Tim, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And Tim, I just have to let you know, my previous guest that I talked about, and we had talked about this beforehand, too. She was cyberstalked on her cell phone with text messages and emails, and we were trying to come up with something that people can do, and there was not a lot, particularly on a cell phone, right, that we were able to come up with in terms of just stopping this.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, the technology, everybody wants these cell phones and smartphones and everything to be able to do everything, and quite honestly, they can. But when there's a problem, right now the technology has not caught up to providing us with some really good safeguard filters to help those kind of situations.
Right. You get much more protection from a landline, and this I do know, but the cell phones are pretty much wide open to the text and to the calls. Now, emails, there are some filtering things that you can do to block a person's emails, right?
Yeah.
But
yes, in the email situation, you can actually go on and register a email that you do not want to receive, and basically it is blocked. You would not have to even bother seeing that it was blocked, because once you put that request or command in on your email system, it just won't allow it to come to you, and you won't have to deal with it. So on the emails systems with the networks, we can block those, and that's a good thing.
Yes. All right. And she had felt, unfortunately, that this stalker was known to her, which is not always the case, and especially what we're going to be talking about shortly. And she felt that if she did anything to block his messages, it would make him more violent. So that's a point I really want to reiterate. You've got to try and assess the person, if you know who the person is, at what's going to be a safer path to take with this. Now, you've had quite a background. Just talk a little bit about your background, Tim. I mean, I had no idea.
Sure. Well, it started out in law enforcement, but I didn't take the normal route of staying in, say, a patrol or a basic law enforcement. I really branched out and got involved early in the SWAT team, and then I moved into a special high crimes unit. Then from there, I moved into narcotics, and I worked a federal task force and worked things with narcotic gangs and other gangs and other type of drug dealing situations. So I had quite a lengthy experience in dealing with the more violent and the more involved criminal. And then from there, retired and decided to be able to go on the private side and help individuals and corporations and other organizations with the continuing problem of violence.
And you are an expert on violent behavior, which I think is interesting. Now, how did you get into the cyber end of things?
Well, as I got more knowledgeable and we really developed some national expertise programs in anticipating and actually we are helping individuals and businesses, but basically what we're doing is we started really looking at the word violence and rage, and that's where the book Life Rage came from and all that. And we started really trying to have a better understanding, what are people dealing with when they're dealing with rage? It could be a domestic violence, it could be a criminal rage, it could be inside the workplace violence, and all the way down to what happened is we've seen a significant increase in stalking, and then with the electronic age came the almighty cyberstalking, and we were right there really trying to get an understanding of how to deal with those type of people in the cyberstalking and in the physical stalking too, because it's become a major problem.
Oh, indeed. And what Amy and I my previous guests were talking about too, is that while there are laws on the books in all 50 states about stalking, even if the penalties may not be as severe as we or a victim would like it, but at least there is a law, under which you can prosecute somebody. But when it comes to cyber stalking, not all the states have this, and the penalties vary wildly. Do you think that this is? Are we starting to catch up with what we need to do in terms of cyber stalking?
Well, there's two things on the cyber stalking. Number one, a lot of the legislators across the United States and in the individual states are becoming very much aware of cyber stalking from general interest groups that are out there, like witness justice programs in different states and the national level. They're bringing these type of issues to the legislators and educating them, making them more sensitive to the cyber stalking. And so, you're going to see a tremendous increase both on a national and an individual state level about cyber stalking. Secondly, even though there's cyber stalking and people look at it as new and they say there isn't legislation passed for it, technically someone could take a cyber stalking situation if they handled their situation in their case properly, and it could easily be turned into and fall under the guidelines of a physical stalking also. But a lot of people just aren't aware of how to do that, and and that's one of the issues that maybe we could talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Now in my previous guest's case, her cyber stalker was in Florida and stalking her in New York. And
and let me interrupt you. I'm sorry, but that is actually an advantage to the person that's being stalked, because now the individual is using electronics, cell phones, regular phones, emails, and is going across state lines. And as soon as a cyber stalker, goes across state lines, you now grab the interest of the federal authorities, because that falls under the federal wiretaps and the electronic laws, where you're crossing the state lines, and now you can get the real interest, or stronger interest, I should say, of the federal authorities, just from the fact that they're going across state lines electronically.
And she was able to bring in the FBI in on it, but it took a year of Florida saying it's New York's problem and New York saying it's Florida's problem before she knew. I don't know if maybe she could have gotten in a little quicker. I don't know, but she was eventually able to get the FBI into it, and the FBI was actually he was incarcerated for about 6 months, and the final case is still being settled, but he appears to have backed off in any event. So that's one interesting thing to mention.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out, because you bring up a really interesting situation, and I'm very much into the psychology of the criminal mind and how you diffuse it and deflect it in these situations. In her case, and I don't know the details, but from what you've told me previously when we've talked, in her case it was unique because she felt that, oh my gosh, I got to be real careful. I don't want to make this guy angry, because if I do certain things, it'll make him more angry, and it could result in some worse situations. And that is the psychology of a cyber stalker, any stalker, especially ones that are known to the person or have a previous relationship. They intimidate the victim into believing that if they go anywhere and tell anyone, that it's going to be much worse, and that's what we call the control mechanism in stalking. And the perpetrators are very good at putting those control mechanisms, and they're really based on fear and intimidation. And contrary, those situations are not true. As in her case, once she got federal authorities or other law enforcement involved, and they addressed it to him directly, what happens now is that person, that perpetrator, loses their psychological control and their advantage and their power of control, and actually it does diffuse the situation because now they know their secret is no longer a secret, and they are fighting a force that is much greater than them, i.e. the federal or the local law enforcement. So I really want the listeners to understand that intimidation at all levels, stalking, domestic violence, one of the main things that we have discovered in our research is the perpetrator really intimidates the victim to believing that if they go and get help, it'll be worse. And we have proven that the opposite happens. Once that perpetrator knows they are not in control and it isn't a secret and there are others out there more powerful than them, that is the beginning of ending your misery.
All right, Tim, I'm going to pick this up again when we come right back. This is Crime Prevention 101. More about cyberstalking in just a few seconds.
Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. That's it. VoiceAmerica.com.
After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartlestone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information.
Are you ready to talk football with the greatest wide receiver player and coach in NFL history? Tune in to Wide Open with Andre Rison. Andre is ready to talk to you and give his thoughts on the sport. There'll be celebrity guests, coaches, players, artists, and more. He'll go beyond the game with a look from the coach's point of view and feature a high school player each week. Tune in to Wide Open with host Andre Rison, featured Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Sports Channel.
While parenting has its joys, it's also stressful. If you'd like help finding practical solutions to the challenges you're facing, listen to Real Parents, Real Solutions with host Tony Sciutta. You'll leave with options you can try with your kids right after the broadcast. Tony will interview experts and real parents for real solutions to problems that will reduce your stress and make your family happier. Call in, write in. This show is for you. Real Parents, Real Solutions airs Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Stimulating talk.
It gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone.
This is Susan Bartlestone. And I want to remind you that Crime Prevention 101 is available on iTunes. You don't even have to be at your computer to listen. I've been talking with Timothy Dimoff from Sachs Consulting, and I just want to give you his website information. It's www.sacs, and that's SACS, consulting.com, and you can get more information about the kind of programs that he's involved in. Now, I do agree with you, Tim. Before the break, we were talking about, not giving in to the being frightened by the stalker, to taking action. I do agree with that, but I have to you got to kind of know the stalker. In some cases, police intervention, orders of protections, and so forth, does make the situation work. So I agree with you, but you've got to give them a little bit of leeway, the person that's being stalked. But the main thing is to go and talk to somebody about it, not, find out what your options might be and the consequences of silence as opposed to taking action, and then see what makes more sense. I'd like to put it that way, I think.
Okay, that sounds good. Now
let's talk about social media. We're all on it. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. How does cyberstalking and social media connect?
Well, the connection there is, unfortunately, when we all jumped into this social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, MySpace, we assume we were just talking to our friends, our neighbors, our classmates, our coworkers, and was one big happy family and bunch of friends. And that's really not true. Basically, the social networking is still fine, but what I warn people about is don't put details of your daily life on social network. You don't need to tell everybody where you like to get coffee, where you shop, where you wash your car, what bars you hang around, and et cetera. And that's where the danger on social networking is basically don't give details away about your personal or business schedule, because that is the ammunition that the stalker is looking for.
A good point. And you know what makes me nervous? Posting pictures of your kids and everything and where they go to school. I mean, it's all fine if your network is just your friends and family, but anyone can see what's up on your Facebook. Anyone can see what's on Twitter. And I'm not really familiar. I know there's like 100 more social networks. I don't even know what the security is like. How can somebody recognize if they are in danger of being stalked through social media?
Well, basically, the more details you provide on your social network, the higher chance you have of eventually being stalked or having other types of problems. Also, there are mechanisms on all the social network sites for confining who has access and privacy and not putting it out there in the general internet and that. And a lot of people do not utilize those security controls, and people need to brush up on those security controls for each of the networks. That would help a lot too.
Can you go into a little more detail about the security controls? Like, I know you can remove somebody as a friend. Is that effective, or can they come back in disguise? Or
well, that's effective, but without getting into details, there's certain security protocols that you can sign up for on the social networks that says, I do not want my information to be publicly accessed. I mean, there's a lot of people don't even know that mechanism is on each of the social networks. You can limit, you can increase your limits of who and on how people can access your information. Most people just go on a social network and they fill in their information and they never bother to go into the details of the controls and the security controls and protocols. And there's a whole list of questions that are asked by each of the social network sites that people need to go into and answer those questions. I mean, there's questions in there that say, do you want this information to be a public access? And basically, people need to set up their parameters in the social network sites and take some time to learn and to register the proper parameters. But the bottom line is, stay away from details about your daily life, whether it's personal and or business, on your social network.
That's an excellent point. You know something? I didn't even know that. I'm going to have to go back in and check and see, because my business does attract an interesting mix of people, what I do, and fortunately I've never had any problems. But you know what? Prevention. That's what I'm always talking about, and this is definitely one of the things that I think I can do to prevent any unwanted attention to myself. I'm actually not a big Twitterer. I'm not the one that's going to be saying I'm online at the Motor Vehicle Bureau. You know, I'll say, I've got a show coming up, or there's an article to see, and it's kind of less social for me than media for me.
Yeah, and Twitter, and I have a very aggressive Twitter program. But my Twitter, I'm releasing on a daily basis information and interesting articles, dilemmas, trends, etc., that are out there. And I'm using Twitter as an educational tool, and the people that follow me on Twitter, they're definitely using that purely to get information. But once again, I'm not on Twitter saying I'm going to a movie tonight at such and such a location, right, and I'm sitting here in a coffee house and everybody's happy. That's mundane. That's not the direction we're going to be going. We're going to be using more of the social networks and Twitters and other related areas and similar in the future, really to help each other, educate each other about various things that can make a difference in our personal and professional lives.
Well, that's for us. And, unfortunately, cyberstalking now mostly affects kids and teens, especially on these social networking things. So I want to give a good resource. You may know of this also. There's Working to Halt Online Abuse, and it's haltabuse.org. There's WHOA, WHOA, again, Working to Halt Online Abuse, Kids Teens Division, and that's haltabusektd.org. And also for your parents, if you've got if your kids' social media activities are making you a little bit nervous, there's an organization called PURE, P-U-R-E, and you can access that at www.suecheff.com. Don't forget, if you've got any social media questions or cyberstalking questions, you can contact Timothy Dimoff, sacsconsulting.com, www.sacsconsulting.com. Well, Tim, thank you so very much for being here. It always goes so quickly for us, doesn't it?
It sure does. And let me just also say they could go to www.liferage.com, and there's a lot of important information there, too. So we're running both sites, and I appreciate it.
Good. I didn't even get a chance to talk to you about that. Maybe you come back again. Let's talk about Life's Rages, because that certainly fits into crime prevention.
Well, I'd love to come back, and thank you, and good luck to all your listeners.
Wonderful. Well, that's a wrap for now, but never fear, because you and I will be doing this again next week, same time, same station. And next week, I'm going to be talking about how you can use your cell phone as a personal safety device. And I'm also going to be talking about cyberbullying, a crime that primarily affects teens and youngsters, often with tragic outcomes. You know what? It'd be a crime not to listen, so stay tuned and stay safe.
We hope you got some useful information and inspiration this week on Crime Prevention 101. Susan Bartlestone invites you to join us again next Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Voice America. If you want to learn more about Susan's guest, sign up for her newsletter, or find out about upcoming teleseminars and workshops, go to www.crimeprevention101.com today. Have a great week and a safe week.